just wanted one thing, to give my 8-year-old son a birthday he'd never forget. The kind of day he'd look back on someday and say, "Dad, that was the best day of my life." And for a while, it was. Perfect. Till she showed up, Karen. And in the blink of an eye, she turned my son's laughter into stunned silence. Right then and there, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. It all kicked off on a bright Saturday morning. The grill was smoking. Balloons bobbed from every chair and fence post, and our backyard looked like something ripped straight out of Home and Garden, if you squinted past a few wild hedges anyway. Jake, my boy, was practically a blur, sprinting around like a caffeinated kangaroo. It was his big day, his 8th birthday. The dino explosion party he'd been dreaming about since February was finally happening. We had it all. A dinosaur cake the size of a coffee table, inflatable T-Rex suits lumbering around the backyard, decorations that made the whole place look more Jurassic Park than suburban cul-de-sac. Even the weather showed up, sunny, with just enough breeze to keep the cake from becoming a frosting puddle. Neighbors started rolling in with kids in tow. Coolers thudded onto decks. Laughter and high-pitched shrieks filled the air. That kind of wild kid noise that's adorable when you're not the one responsible for supervising. It was shaping up to be the kind of memory you seal inside your heart forever. That is, until Karen slithered into view. Every neighborhood has a Karen. Ours came fully loaded. A platinum blonde bob, stiff enough to deflect bullets. Sunglasses the size of satellite dishes. And, of course, a clipboard fused to her hand like a weapon. But Karen had something even more dangerous. An unofficial title she'd awarded herself. Community Enhancement Officer of the HOA. Translation: Mood Assassin. And just to make the horror clear, Karen didn't even technically live on our side of the street. She had no business, no jurisdiction past Elm Street. But when it came to sniffing out Happy Miss violations, Karen knew no boundaries. Balloons? Unauthorized event. Children laughing? Disturbance of the peace. If there was joy, Karen smelled a code infraction. So when Jake and his buddies started kicking around a little red ball across the backyard, it wasn't a question of if something bad would happen. It was just a matter of when. And sure enough, about 10 minutes into the chaos, that bright red ball sailed into the air. Higher, higher, and with a soft plop, it disappeared over the back fence, straight into Karen's surgically pristine swimming pool. At first, nobody noticed. The kids kept playing. The adults kept laughing. But you know that weird moment when the energy shifts, when everything gets just a little too quiet. Yeah. Then, bam! Karen's back door slammed open so hard it rattled the windows. She stormed out, screeching like a banshee at a Beatles concert. Neon pink bathrobe flapping like an evil cape. Phone in hand, already recording evidence of a hostile attack. "Whose ball is this? Who authorized this ball?" she shrieked, loud enough to wake the ancestors. I dropped my burger tongs and jogged toward the fence, stomach dropping. "Sorry, Karen," I called. "We'll get it. No harm done." But Karen didn't want an apology. Karen wanted a scene. Without hesitation, she grabbed her pool skimmer like it was a sword, scooped up that little red ball as if it were radioactive, and held it aloft like a trophy. And then, in front of Jake, his friends, their parents, and half the neighborhood, she stabbed it. I'm not kidding. She drove her absurdly manicured nails right through that ball like it had personally insulted her great-grandmother. Then she hurled the deflated, lifeless remains over the fence, landing them at my feet. The laughter died instantly. The music cut off mid-song. Conversations froze. And Jake stood there, still clutching the tail of his dinosaur costume, wide-eyed, his little hands trembling. His small shoulders sagged. His bright, happy face crumpled, and somewhere deep in my chest, something cracked wide open. Karen, meanwhile, spun on her heel, bathrobe fluttering like a victory banner, and marched back inside, as if she just liberated a village. The party limped on after that, but the magic was gone. The kids played, but only out of politeness. The parents whispered awkwardly to each other. Jake barely touched his dinosaur cake. I sat on the porch, watching my boy force a smile that didn't even come close to reaching his eyes. Feeling that slow, boiling rage start to bubble up inside me. Karen hadn't just popped a ball. She popped a memory. A shining, irreplaceable moment my boy was supposed to treasure for the rest of his life. And right then, sitting on that porch, I knew this wasn't over. After the last guests had trickled away, the final scraps of wrapping paper dumped in the bin, and Jake finally drifted off to sleep, I found myself sitting alone on the porch, a warm beer sweating in my hand. My eyes locked on the shadowy fence line where Karen's backyard began, and my brain, it just wouldn't quit. That awful moment replayed again and again, stuck on a brutal loop. Jake's crumpled little face, the sad, deflated ball at his feet. The laughter that had been sliced clean off, like a guillotine through joy. Karen had crossed the line, and there was no way I was letting her skate away without remembering it. Every single time she looked at her perfect backyard. At first, I thought small. Write a stern letter, report her tantrum to the real HOA board, file a noise complaint the next time her goblin dog started shrieking at 6 a.m. But honestly, that would have been letting her off way too easy. Karen hadn't just thrown a fit over a ball. She had crushed a kid's birthday joy. On purpose. That deserved a response crafted with the same childish, petty energy she dished out. Something unforgettable. Something that would make her flinch every time she glanced at her pristine backyard oasis. And then, like a lightning bolt straight to the brain, it hit me. If one little ball could ruin her day, what would she do if there were hundreds? Not a few tossed into the bushes, not a handful tucked behind her hedges. No. I was going to fill her sparkling, brag-worthy pool with balls. Hundreds of them. A bouncing, chaotic ocean of rubbery vengeance. But it had to be perfect. Everyone on the block needed to know. Everyone needed to remember. Step 1, acquisition. I cracked open my laptop and dove into the hunt. Amazon? Tempting, but too slow. Party supply stores? Weak. Maybe 50 balls tops, and half of them probably dusty leftovers from last summer. 2 hours deep into desperate searching, including some seriously sketchy Facebook Marketplace posts, I finally struck gold. Big Dan's Playland Supply, a local guy, liquidating his bounce house business inventory. The ad? 300 assorted bouncy balls. Good condition. $100 or best offer. I nearly choked on my beer. I hammered out a message faster than a seagull snatching a boardwalk hot dog. I'll take them all. Cash. Tomorrow. A reply came back almost instantly. Cool. Bring a truck. Ho, buddy. I had a truck. The next morning, after dropping Jake off at school, pretending to be casual while vibrating with excitement, I hit the ATM, stuffed my pockets with 20s, and pointed the truck toward destiny. Big Dan turned out to be exactly what you hope for in a Craigslist meetup. A mountain of a man, arms sleeved in tattoos, and a ponytail thick enough to climb out of a tower with. You sure you want all of them? He asked, waving toward a garage bursting with plastic tubs of balls. Every size, every color, every ridiculous pattern imaginable. Dan, I said, grinning like a guy about to commit the world's most wholesome felony, I want every last one. An hour later, my truck looked like a mobile clown factory. Dan even threw in a few extra tubs for dramatic effect, giving me a conspiratorial wink. Legend. By noon, I was back home, my colorful army hidden behind the shed, adrenaline buzzing in my veins. Timing would be everything. I had to strike when Karen's nosy little binoculars weren't scanning the horizon. So, after a bit of neighborly recon, aka shameless eavesdropping on old Jerry's front porch gossip session, I discovered Karen had a standing hair appointment every Thursday at 2 p.m. Perfect. That gave me exactly 3 hours to execute Operation Ballocalypse. I checked my watch. 3 days to go. Plenty of time to fine-tune the most glorious, ridiculously petty, and completely legal act of suburban justice this neighborhood had ever seen. And trust me, I wasn't wasting a single minute. Thursday rolled in slow and heavy, like a smug freight train that knew exactly what it was bringing. All morning I paced the house, checking and double-checking my gear like a suburban general prepping for battle. Balls? Check. Over 300 of them, gleaming like tiny rubbery grenades. Heavy-duty net? Check. Vital for a clean, coordinated drop. Ladder? Obviously. Strategic fence hop. Mandatory. Plan B? Double check. Neighbor Tony, ready to text me if Karen came home early. Payment? 6 bottles of his favorite IPA. I wasn't nervous. I was focused. At exactly 1:45 p.m., right on schedule, I spotted Karen's SUV backing out of the driveway, off to her sacred hair appointment. 10 seconds later, Tony's text came through. Green light. It was go time. I shoved a baseball cap onto my head, pun very much intended, hoisted 2 enormous nets packed with my rubbery arsenal, and hauled them across the backyard like a deranged Santa Claus, delivering chaos instead of gifts. My heart thudded in my chest as I leaned the ladder against the fence, clambered up, and vaulted into enemy territory. Karen's backyard was everything you'd expect, and somehow worse. Perfectly manicured hedges, painfully coordinated patio furniture, a giant live, laugh, love sign nailed to her pergola like a suburban battle standard. And her pride and joy, the pool. Glassy, sterile, smug. Not for long. I sprinted to the edge, yanked open the first net, and unleashed pure, bouncing mayhem. Blue balls, red balls, glitter balls, even a few earth-shaped globes tumbled into the water in a glorious, unstoppable avalanche. Within seconds, her perfect suburban sanctuary looked like a carnival warehouse had exploded. I dumped the second net for good measure, making sure not a single inch of that smug water surface was left uncovered. The pool shimmered, a chaotic, rubbery ocean of rebellion. It was beautiful, a masterpiece of petty vengeance. I snapped a few photos for posterity and future bragging rights, then vaulted back over the fence like a cartoon villain making a clean getaway. Back on my own porch, I collapsed into my chair, heart hammering, a stupid, glorious grin plastered across my face. Operation Ballpocalypse, mission accomplished. Now all that was left was the waiting. And buddy, it was the sweetest anticipation I've ever tasted. The first signs came around 3:30 p.m. A screech of tires, the mechanical groan of a garage door, a car door slamming, and then a scream. Not a stub-your-toe scream, not even a "my dog ate my wallet" scream. This was a primal, apocalyptic screech, the kind that rattles the leaves clean off the trees. Grinning, I grabbed my phone, already rolling video, and pointed it through a gap in the fence. And there she was, Karen, storming across her patio like a vengeful suburban Valkyrie, hair shellacked into submission, nails sharpened like battle weapons. She skidded to a halt at the edge of the pool and froze. Her jaw dropped open in pure, unfiltered horror. Before her stretched a bouncing, neon ocean of rubber chaos. For a heartbeat, she just stood there, fists clenched, chest heaving. And then, the real show began. "Who did this?" she shrieked, her voice cracking like a rusty car alarm. "Who defaced my property?" She lunged for her pool skimmer and started wildly thrashing at the balls, only managing to whip them into frothing neon waves. "I'll find you. You can't hide. I'm calling the police. I'm calling the HOA. I'm calling—" And that's when fate intervened. Her foot caught on a glittery ball floating near the edge. Down she went, flat on her back. Water and balls exploded upward in a glorious, chaotic fountain. The screech she unleashed could have shattered every wine glass on the block. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from bursting out laughing, tears already streaming down my face as I kept the camera steady. Across the street, Tony, who was watering his lawn, was filming too, his shoulders shaking like a kid trying not to laugh in church. Karen scrambled up, soaked from head to toe. Her once pristine hair drooped like melted marshmallow fluff. Mascara streaked down her face like gothic rivers. She started snapping furious photos of the crime scene, muttering darkly like a soap opera villainess. "There will be consequences. This is a federal offense." "Sure, Karen, sure." Meanwhile, the rest of the neighborhood was catching on. Curtains twitched, sprinklers accidentally turned on. Karen had officially gained an audience. And buddy, the show was only getting started. If you've ever seen a cat trying to claw its way out of a bathtub, you've got a pretty good mental picture of Karen scrambling to salvage her dignity, soaked, furious, sputtering like a lawnmower on its last breath. She stomped back into her house, leaving behind a trail of wet footprints and a cloud of pure, undiluted rage. I sank deeper into my chair, still casually recording, because deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, she burst back outside, brandishing the ultimate suburban weapon, her phone, already dialed to the non-emergency police line. I zoomed in with my camera, trying not to laugh out loud. "Yes, I'd like to report vandalism," she screeched, pacing around the pool like a deranged field commander. "An attack on my private property." Behind her, the neon sea of bouncing balls bobbed peacefully in the breeze, completely undermining her war cries. There are hundreds of balls," she shrieked, "in my private pool. This is domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism." I almost fell out of my chair laughing. And she wasn't done yet. Her voice kept climbing into glass-shattering frequencies as she invented charges on the fly. Hazardous conditions, emotional distress, neighborhood destabilization. I could only imagine the poor dispatcher on the other end slapping the mute button halfway through her meltdown. At some point, Karen spun around, pointed a furious manicured claw right over the fence, straight at me, and shrieked, "It's him! It's Ryan! He's a known troublemaker! I've warned the HOA about him!" Known troublemaker? Lady, my biggest crime up to now was installing a birdhouse without getting aesthetic approval. After another round of shrieking about lawsuits reaching the governor's office, Karen finally slammed her phone down, huffing and stomping like the big bad wolf flunking out of Anger Management 101. She stormed back into her house, slamming the door so hard the decorative wreath popped clean off and tumbled across the street. Across the road, I spotted Tony watering his very average lawn, along with a few accidental neighbors who had gathered nearby. One of them caught my eye and gave a subtle salute. The rumors were already spreading faster than a gas leak. About 15 minutes later, the cavalry arrived. A police cruiser, lights off, rolled up slow and easy, parking right in front of Karen's palace of passive-aggressive rage. Out stepped Officer Daniels, a brick wall of a man, more famous for solving cat-stuck-in-tree situations than arresting hardened criminals. Karen practically lunged at him in the driveway, words spilling out of her like a broken auctioneer. I couldn't catch every word, but bits drifted over. "Destruction of property, psychological warfare. I demand forensic analysis." Officer Daniels listened patiently, bless his heart, and scribbled something in his notepad. Then, with the calm of a man who'd seen it all, he asked, "Ma'am, is there any actual property damage?" Karen sputtered, They contaminated my water. With balls, ma'am? Yes, hundreds of them. Any injuries? I slipped. I could have been paralyzed. Are you paralyzed? Karen flushed the color of an overripe tomato. No, she muttered. Daniels nodded, barely hiding a smile. He wandered over to the pool, nudging a few bouncy balls with his boot like a bored teenager, and finally announced, "Ma'am, looks like a prank. No vandalism, no property damage, no threat to public safety." Karen's jaw dropped so hard, I swear I heard it clunk against the pavement. "So you're not arresting him?" "No, ma'am." She stood there, blinking like a fish gasping for air. Meanwhile, I raised my lemonade in a slow, silent toast from my porch. Officer Daniels caught my eye, gave the world's smallest wink, and said something that made Karen whirl around and stomp back into her house, fists clenched like a toddler denied dessert. The police cruiser rolled off into the sunset. Neighbors quietly drifted back to their homes, grinning behind their hands. The pool, still glittering under the evening sun, floated peacefully with hundreds of cheerful, bouncy balls. Karen's fortress had fallen. But buddy, wait. The war wasn't over. Because if you think Karen was the type to accept defeat quietly, you clearly haven't met my HOA. That evening, once the dust had settled and Karen had scurried back into her house like a wounded possum, I finally sat down with Jake to show him the footage. I fast-forwarded to the best parts. Karen slipping and flailing, Karen shrieking about domestic terrorism, Karen swinging her pool skimmer like a battle axe in the middle of a Disney villain meltdown. Jake leaned in closer, his eyes growing wide. And then, right on cue, Karen roared, "Who dared to defile my property?" Jake absolutely lost it. He laughed so hard he nearly fell off the couch, clutching his sides, tears streaming down his face. "Dad," he gasped between fits of laughter, "she looks like one of those evil cartoon characters." "Exactly," I said, smiling. "That's what happens when you mess with Mitchell's birthday." He watched it 3 more times, each replay setting off another round of unstoppable giggles. I hadn't seen him that genuinely happy since last Christmas. And it wasn't just about the prank. It was something deeper. The realization that sometimes, just sometimes, bullies really do get what's coming to them. We capped the night with ice cream on the porch, feeling lighter than we had in weeks. The neighborhood, the lake, the whole world, it all felt right again. But the next morning, I woke up, grabbed my coffee, stepped outside, and froze. My yard, my quiet, neatly kept little haven, was absolutely buried in balls. Hundreds of them, everywhere, scattered across the porch, bobbing in the bird bath, wedged into the flower beds, rolling lazily across the lawn. I just stood there for a second, blinking, and then I started laughing. A deep, genuine belly laugh that shook the trees and sent birds scattering into the sky. Karen, in all her petty glory, had tried to get revenge by returning every last ball in the most dramatic way she could muster. It was adorable. I sipped my coffee right there on the steps, admiring the rubbery battlefield with nothing but pure, amused appreciation. No anger, no irritation, just a quiet respect for how spectacularly bad she was at revenge. After a while, I casually grabbed a few garbage bags, took my time picking up the balls, and stacked them neatly in the garage. Because you see, I had a plan. A better plan. While Karen was out there throwing her late-night tantrum, I had made sure to pull footage from my security cameras. Footage that just so happened to show her trespassing on my property, ranting and muttering threats like a B-list Disney villain who missed her cue. And now it was time to share it with a wider audience. I opened my laptop, logged into YouTube, and started uploading the masterpiece. Title: HOA Karen loses it over pool balls and trespasses on my lawn. Thumbnail: Karen mid-scream, dripping wet, surrounded by a neon rainbow of floating chaos. I clicked publish with a satisfied little tap. then leaned back in my chair, took another slow sip of coffee, and smiled. Let the world enjoy the show. By lunchtime that very same day, the video had already started picking up steam. At first, it just floated quietly around our neighborhood Facebook group, a few likes here and there. Then Tony reposted it with the caption, "This is why you don't mess with Ryan." Then Ellen from the next street over shared it to her gardening club's page, adding, "Suburban justice, served ice cold." By sunset, it exploded louder than 4th of July fireworks. Thousands of views, comments pouring in faster than a busted fire hydrant, memes, reaction videos. Someone even edited a slow-motion clip of Karen slipping into the pool, set to dramatic opera music. It was majestic. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months started stopping by just to shake my hand. Bye. You're a legend, man. Finally, someone put her in her place. Steak dinner's on us. Even the teens who normally treated me like background scenery started tossing me casual fist bumps when they passed. Jake, of course, was beaming. "Dad, you're like famous now," he laughed, nearly dropping his phone as he scrolled through the flood of comments. I just smiled, because it wasn't about fame. It was about finally seeing a bully get exactly what she deserved. But not everyone was thrilled. Oh no, not even close. Late that afternoon, as the sun sagged low and the cicadas cranked up their summer symphony, I heard it. The angry slap, slap, slap of cheap flip-flops pounding the pavement. Karen, marching straight toward my porch like a suburban Valkyrie ready for war. Her face, still blotchy from her earlier meltdown, twisted into a sour expression so sharp it could have curdled fresh milk. She didn't even bother pretending to be polite. She jabbed a manicured finger at me and shrieked, "Take it down!" I leaned back in my chair, calm as a Sunday breeze. "Take what down, Karen?" "The video," she screeched. "It's slander. It's defamation." I shrugged casually. "Pretty sure it's just you in your natural habitat." Karen stomped her foot like a toddler denied candy. "You're humiliating me," she howled. "Karen," I said evenly, "you humiliated yourself. I just hit record." Her fists balled up at her sides. "I'll sue you. I'll bring in the HOA." From across the yard, Tony, who was coincidentally watering his lawn for the 3rd time that day, called out, "Hey Karen, remember, public behavior, public consequences." And that's when she realized, for the first time in years, Karen, queen of the HOA, mistress of the clipboards, stood utterly painfully alone. No backup. No little army of busybodies. Just one furious woman, surrounded by neighbors who weren't scared of her anymore. Her face twisted into something halfway between a grimace and a snarl. She let out a frustrated growl, an actual growl, spun on her heel, and stomped back toward her house, kicking a rogue ball along the way like it personally offended her. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Of course, Karen wasn't the type to slink away quietly after a public meltdown. About a week after the video went viral, a thick envelope showed up in my mailbox. Hand-delivered, no less. Inside, a cease and desist letter. Signed by some budget lawyer with a Gmail address and a Comic Sans letterhead. Yes, really. Karen was officially demanding that I remove the defamatory content from YouTube or face legal consequences of the highest order. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my sandwich. It felt like being threatened by a raccoon wielding a butter knife. I brought the letter to my buddy Frank, an actual lawyer, who skimmed it while casually sipping his beer. When he finished, he leaned back, grinned, and said, "Ryan, this thing wouldn't hold up in a court of pigeons." Turns out, filming someone on your own private property, out in the open, during a meltdown they started, wasn't just legal, it was protected. Public behavior equals public consequences. Frank even offered to draft a polite response. Bring it on. We never heard another peep from Karen. Meanwhile, the video just kept climbing. 500,000 views, reaction videos. Someone even made a techno remix of Karen's scream, which Jake insisted on blasting every time we got in the car. And Karen? Karen unraveled. She stopped showing up at HOA meetings, stopped her daily inspections, stopped terrorizing neighbors with passive-aggressive notes about lawn length. Neighbors she once bullied now openly chuckled as she stomped past. Kids on bikes would cruise by her house chanting, "Ball pit for Karen, ball pit for Karen," like it was the victory anthem of the summer. The final blow? A giant, desperate-looking for sale sign popped up on her front lawn. Big, shiny, urgent. No mention of community leader or HOA queen on the listing. Just the cold, hard words. Urgent sale, immediate closing available. 2 weeks later, the moving truck showed up. Karen shuffled out box after box, her face twisted into a permanent scowl. She didn't look at anyone, didn't say goodbye, just loaded up her life and left, punctuated only by the soft, pathetic sound of flip-flops slapping down the driveway one last time. The day after she left, it felt like the entire neighborhood exhaled at once. Lighter, freer, alive again. Jake and I stood on the porch, sipping lemonade, watching a young couple move into Karen's old house. Friendly smiles, warm hellos, not a clipboard in sight. I glanced down at Jake and said, "You know, buddy, sometimes the good guys really do win." He grinned and replied, "Especially if they've got a lot of bouncy balls." We laughed, clinked our glasses, and watched the sunset bathe our street in golden light. Peace, it turns out, isn't the absence of chaos. It's knowing you can survive any storm, even the kind that wears flip-flops and carries a clipboard from hell. Sometimes, all it takes is a little patience, a lot of humor, and about 300 rubber balls. If you like this story, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Also, we have created a playlist where we collected all the best Karen's condominium stories. You can see it on the screen now. Click to play it. I assure you, you will laugh like never before. Thank you for watching.